Hello guys, and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'll be showing you how I made these super warm, super cozy plaid hooded fleece lined sweaters. If you're interested in how I achieved this look, please stay tuned. Alright guys, let's get started. So here I have about 4 yards of this black and red plaid fabric, and 2 yards of this black fleece, and some paracord that I opted out on later. Then I have these large eyelets, and the large eyelet toolkit. To make the pattern, I'll be using one of my husband's sweaters. And then of course I'll be using some scissors, some pins, a pen, and I used a pencil, and some measuring tape. And I also have some craft paper here to make the pattern. So first I took the sweater and folded that in half, then lined that up to the end of the paper. And then I went ahead and straightened that out and traced out the body of the sweater. Now for the armhole, I went ahead and took my seam ripper. And what I did was poked through the seaming so that it went through to the paper. Then I went ahead and did that for the neckline as well. Then I removed the sweater and went ahead and traced those lines out. Here I just took my ruler and a Sharpie to go ahead and straighten out those lines. I also labeled the pattern piece as well. Here I'm marking the curved neckline for the front of the sweater on the same pattern piece. Next, I took the arm of the sweater and went ahead and traced that out with my pencil. Then I took my seam ripper to mark along the top of the sleeve. And again, I went over and straightened out the lines with my ruler and my Sharpie. Also, I did make sure to add my 1/2 inch seam allowance to all the pattern pieces. Here I have all my pattern pieces cut out, and for some reason I lost the clip of tracing over the hoodie, but all I did was fold the hoodie in half and trace the same way I did for the sleeve and the body of the sweater. I used my pattern pieces to cut my plaid and fleece fabric patterns out, and both the sleeves and the body piece were cut on a fold. To make the pocket, I took some fabric and folded it in half. I measured 12 inches long on the fold, then 10 inches wide. I measured 5 inches across the top and 6 inches on the side. Then I cut across from those 2 points. And now I have my front pocket piece. To make the pocket flaps, I measured the opening of the pocket. Then I added 1 inch onto the doubled fabric, then measured 4 inches wide, folded that in half, then cut a curve at the bottom. I did that twice for both pocket flaps. For the Henley Placket, I took some plaid fabric and cut a piece 7 inches long and 6 inches wide. I took the front piece of the sweater and pinned down at the center point. I lined the placket at the center point 2 inches over and pinned it down. From that point, I measured and pinned 6 inches down. Now I'm going to sew down, across, and then back up from those 2 points. And here's how that stitch looks, starting from the very top, going all the way down to 6 inches, then across, and then all the way back up to the very top. Then I cut very carefully in between those 2 stitches. Now I have the opening for the Henley with 2 inches of placket on one side and 4 inches of placket on the other side. I flipped the front of the sweater onto the other side. Then I turned the placket onto the other side as well. I flipped the side of the placket with 4 inches in half. Then I flipped that side of the placket over onto the other side. And this is how the opening looks from the back. For the front pocket, I folded down a 1/2 inch on the top, on the opening of the pockets, and on the side of the pockets, and pressed that down. Next, I sewed down the hem of the opening of the pockets. After sewing that down, I went ahead and sewed both of the pocket flaps together. Now I'm going to sew buttonholes on both the pocket flaps, and I'm going to sew the buttonholes on the Henley as well. 4 buttonholes to be exact. I set my machine and placed my button onto the buttonhole presser foot, but before sewing, I made sure to center and to measure the buttons on the pocket flaps and the Henley evenly. Then I carefully open the buttonholes with my seam ripper. I found the center point on the front of the sweater for the front pocket. Then I laid the front pocket in the center and lined it up with the bottom of the sweater. Now I'm going to sew down the top and the sides of the pocket. Then I lined the pocket flaps on top of the pocket holes, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew those down. After sewing the pocket flap down, I flipped it onto the other side and sewed a top stitch at the very top. Next, I laid the front of the sweater front side up and the back of the sweater front side down and went ahead and pinned the shoulders together. After sewing the shoulders together, I grabbed the sleeve, then pinned the center point and the shoulder seam together, then continued pinning the sleeve on each side. And now that's ready to sew. After sewing both of the sleeves on, I flipped the sweater inside out and pinned the underarm seams together. Then I sewed straight down from the top of the sleeve to the bottom of the sweater. I took the hood and the lining of the hood, then sewed along the back of the hood on both pieces. I took the plaid hood and at the bottom front end, I measured 2 inches over, then 1 inch up, and marked at that point. I cut a small split at that point and grabbed a large eyelet. Then I inserted the eyelet through that small slit. I grabbed my eyelet toolkit and placed the black piece on top of the eyelet and the silver piece on top of the back of the eyelet. I used my hammer on top of the silver piece, then hammered the back of the eyelet to secure it. Here's what the attached eyelet looks like, and I did the same for the other side. Next, I took the plaid and the lining of the hoodie, lined the seams on top of the pieces and pinned them together, then continued pinning on both sides. Then I went ahead and sewed all the way across. After sewing the hoodie and the lining together, I pressed the seam along the top part of the hoodie. Then I sewed a top stitch just above one eyelet to the other. And here's how that looks. I took the lining of the sweater that I sewed together off camera and placed that inside of the outer part of the sweater inside out. I also pinned the seams of the shoulder from the lining and the outer part of the sweater together. Next, I measured the opening of the Henley, then pinned the center point of the front of the lining. From that point, I cut straight down to the measurement of the opening of the Henley. I took the lining of the sweater and pinned at the seam of the Henley Placket and did the same for the other side. Then I pinned the lining straight down the seam of the Henley on both sides. I took the placket at the center and folded both sides together, then tucked inside and underneath the sweater and pinned that down. From there, I top stitched down one side of the Henley seam, straight across, then back up to the top of the other side of the Henley. So here's what the stitch looks like outside of the Henley, and here's what it looks like on the inside. I also pre-cut the band for the bottom of the sweater, and then the band for the collar, and the band for the sleeves. Pin the center point of the back of the collar of the sweater, then line the seam of the bottom of the hoodie and pin those two together. Then continue pinning down on both sides. Starting from the Henley, I took the collar band and placed it over about 1 inch to 2 inches, then pinned all the way across to the other side of the Henley, lining it up on top of the inside of the hoodie. I cut off the extra fabric on the other side, leaving about 1 inch to 2 inches. Then I sewed all 3 layers together from one end to the other. I folded the collar band in half backwards, then sewed straight down at the point of the opening of the Henley. After sewing both sides of the collar, I cut the excess fabric off. Then I flipped the collar right side out, and it lines up with the opening perfectly. Next, I took the inside of the collar and tucked in 1/2 inch and pinned. Then I continued tucking and pinning all the way across. After pinning, I sewed directly on top of the seam in between the hoodie and the sweater. And now I have a nice clean finish on the inside of my collar. I took the band for the bottom of the sweater and lined it up at the fold. Then I marked the other end and sewed straight down. After sewing the end of the band down, I lined the seams together to fold in half, then continued folding all the way around. Next, I pinned the center point of the band. From the bottom center, I measured 2 inches over, then 1 inch up, and marked at that point, and did the same for the other side. Then I took 2 large eyelets and inserted them at those 2 points the same way I did for the hoodie. I flipped the band over onto the other side and inserted and lined it on top of the end of the sweater. Then I pinned and sewed all the way around. After sewing the band for the bottom of the sweater, I sewed the bands onto the sleeves. Lastly, I attached the buttons for the pocket flaps and the buttons onto the Henley, and now the sweater is complete. I made my husband's sweater by adding 2 inches to the length and the width to the same pattern pieces I used for my sweater. For baby girl's sweater, I used one of her hooded jackets to trace out all of her pattern pieces and made her sweater following the same exact steps as I did for my sweater. Alright guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next one.